Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're thrilled to have you here with us. My name is Liz Syka, and I'll be your host for today's session. We have an exciting topic and an expert speaker lined up just for you. Today's session is titled Alternative Social Engineering Tactics, Thinking Beyond the Inbox. And we're fortunate to have Courtney Bell, Cyber Operations Engineer here at Sidara. Courtney brings a wealth of experience as a red team penetration tester, and she also frequently works with our blue operations team as well. Here's how today's session will unfold. Courtney will present for about 15 minutes, followed by a live Q&A session where you can ask questions directly. We encourage you to participate throughout, and don't be hesitant to share your thoughts or questions via the chat or Q&A panel. A little bit of housekeeping. The session will be recorded, and we'll share the recording with you afterwards. If you have any technical issues, message us in the chat. As mentioned, we'll have Q&A at the end, so please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Courtney.
Hey, thanks so much, Liz. I appreciate you. And thanks everybody for being here. I know it's a Friday afternoon. And so this is a pretty fast webinar. We're going to get in and out in 15 minutes if you don't have questions, and then a little bit longer if you do. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We're talking about social engineering today. And with social engineering, as many of you guys know, this is exploiting the human element rather than, or in addition to, the technical piece. And on our red team, in our penetration testing team, we do quite a bit of social engineering. We do it in just about every engagement that we do. And for many of you, when you think about social engineering, the most common kind that you encounter is email. That is still a threat. We see it every single day. It is the most common way that attackers will go after users. But it's not the only way. You know, it's efficient. One person can send thousands of emails. It's pretty trivial to find users' email addresses. But we are seeing attackers branch out into other vectors. And so some of those are what I want to talk about today, especially with like personal communication. Um, if the question is, do attackers use personal communication methods to attack organizations? The answer is unequivocally yes. We have seen that at Sidara. And unless you have a network that is completely locked down to where users can't even access, Facebook or their personal email or anything else. If you don't have a BYOD, bring your own device strategy in your organization, then maybe that doesn't apply to you. But otherwise, everything is fair game. And so we wanted to talk about some of the ways that attackers will use that stuff to exploit users. All right, so next to email, I would say the most common attack vector that we see is text messages or SMS. Here's an example of one that I got personally. It was a New York State tolls phishing website. I looked into it and it was looking for credentials to log into the New York Tolls website and was also looking for credit card numbers. Extremely convincing. And so I would say that there's like a little bit more awareness on the part of phone providers about what constitutes spam for SMS text messages, but it is absolutely a way that attackers will go after users. And we have seen that in some of the organizations that we work with. I also wanted to mention, I combined all these together. We got text message, or I'm sorry, voicemail, and video. And the reason I kind of paired these together is because they have the unique capability of using AI in order to replicate somebody trusted. And so, someone can take a video, 5-10 seconds, this webinar, and they could replicate my voice. They could replicate video of me. And as a trusted, IT person, you can then call somebody, cloning that person's voice and say, like, can I have your password? Can you do this for me? Can you send this email? Can you reply to this? I went back and forth a little bit on whether this is a common attack vector using AI to replicate somebody's voice or video. I have not yet seen a lot of reports of like credible like credible reports of people using AI voice or video live. And I think that the reason is that the technology that's available to most attackers puts kind of a delay in between when you're either saying something and having it go through a voice filter, or just a natural delay in typing or in generating the video. And any delay is really noticeable in a live conversation. And so I think the technology is not quite at the point where people are widely using this, but a sophisticated attacker might have access to the kind of technology to do like deep fakes of someone's voice or video. And certainly in a year, that whole situation might be different, might be very widespread. And definitely the technology is there to leave voicemails in the voice of a trusted coworker for sure. Like this can be pretty hard to defend against. I think the biggest defense against this attack is just to make people aware that this is possible. The FTC has put out some advisories about this for sure, letting people know that attackers are using AI to duplicate trusted coworkers or people, or just eliminate some of the telltale signs that somebody is trying to scam you. But it's just something to be aware of. So deceptive hardware is a favorite of ours on the red team. We love deceptive hardware. This would be really any hardware that looks like it might be trustworthy, but in reality opens you up to attack. On the red team, we quite often use something called the rubber ducky, which is that little USB drive that's over there. And that is it looks like a normal thumb drive. You know, the one that is in the picture here is kind of naked, but you can put a cover on it so that it just looks like a typical thumb drive or another device. And then when someone plugs it into their computer, it opens up a connection to the attacker. Of course, you could also put other files directly on the USB drive, so it doesn't require a network connection, but you can leave those around. You can leave that. You can just plug them into someone's computer if you can manage to get to their desk, or you could just leave them, you know, in the parking lot on a table, something, and just hope somebody plugs it in and they're owned the instant that they do. Um, Something else that we often use are Wi-Fi access points. You can name a Wi-Fi access point anything. You can name it Starbucks. You can give it the same name as the organization that you're trying to exploit. You can make it look legit. You can name it free Wi-Fi. When people connect to it, the attacker then has access to any of the traffic that's going through there. That can be a little bit trickier if the traffic is encrypted, but attackers still have a way through that. And that's why I have this picture of your connection is not private error screen, because in many cases, that will be what a user would see if they connect to a Wi-Fi access point that is trying to jump into the middle of their transaction that they do online so that they can see what they're doing. And I think all of us are familiar with skimmers, credit card skimmers or card skimmers. Could be used for access stores and things like that. And in the picture here, you can see that they can really kind of sit in line with the legitimate hardware. They can be really, really hard to detect. Um, I don't really think of skimmers as much of a social engineering attack per se, but I just show them to let you guys know that the fabrication of like some of this deceptive hardware can be pretty sophisticated and can be very, very custom, and hard to see sometimes. All right, so I think this is a pretty big attack vector, and I kind of clumped it all together: in-app communications or invitations, things that aren't email, but you know, they use an application of some kind to communicate with you. Anytime you have user-to-user communication, you are going to have people trying to exploit it to social engineer users. One example of this are calendar invites. You can send a calendar invite to anybody, and there's been increasing amounts of calendar spam. So someone will send you a calendar invite, and it includes, you know, the email address or the URL that they want you to visit, and you know, include some tempting information maybe in the calendar invite. File sharing notifications, for example, if you use like Dropbox, someone might create a file that they want you to look at or visit, and then they share it with you. And you will get that in your email, but you can also get it as a notification directly in the application on your phone or on your computer if you have those apps installed. Of course, there is messaging on, if you're an IT person, it might be on infrastructure that you don't have full control over, or visibility into. Teams or Slack, Discord, for example, if you allow that on your network. There's social media private messages. Some forms of social media, you can send files to users that way. And of course, you could just send any message. And social media, by the way, social media applications, they are not very good at filtering for spam or scammy messages. And there's, I said in-game chats because I see this most frequently in games, but it really could be any application that allows user to user contact. I mean, it could be a calorie counting app, for crying out loud. Anything that allows user to user conversations. And this conversation from Paul here is from Words with Friends. It's the game Words with Friends. Um, one thing that I think is notable about this vector, if you're an IT person, is that frequently you just can't see these messages. You might be able to see the calendar invites if it is their official work email, but chances are, if they're using file sharing like Dropbox, if they're using social media on your network, if they have a game on their company provided phone, you may not have visibility to all these social engineering attempts. So it's the only way to prevent users from that is to either limit what they're installing, which may be plausible, maybe not, or make sure that they're educated in what the social engineering looks like. Finally, QR codes. So this is a picture of some Chinese food that I ordered last week, and I was surprised to see that there was a QR code on there. It was not malicious. I checked it out in a sandbox using safe InfoSec practices, and it was the owner trying to promote their child's realtor business. But I think that I included it here because I think it really points out how ubiquitous these QR codes are. They're everywhere. And you cannot see where they lead prior to scanning them. So they are sort of prone to curiosity. People are curious about what the QR code goes to. They scan it with their phone. They go to the website. I think the one saving grace of these is that they are usually scanned with mobile devices, which have some protection against malware built into them. But I guess my point is, QR codes are, just they're everywhere, and people will scan them if they see them. That just pretty much every time. I would also include in this category shortened URLs, so bit.ly, for example, and then there's some value or words after that. You cannot see where those URLs are going, and it can make it pretty difficult to determine if something's a red flag or not based on the domain. So what do you do about this? Well, okay. I thought, we might have some IT folks here, and then we have users, which includes everyone. So if you're an IT person, what I would say is see what you can do with your social engineering training and assessment. If your folks are at a stage of maturity where you're sending out phishing assessments and they're nailing it every time, they can recognize those. See if there's a way to branch out. You may be able to send SMS messages to company provided phones or phone numbers. Beyond that, obviously, personal social engineering, that would be something you'd have to check with your legal department to see if that is possible. But even if you cannot go through that vector to do assessment and training and simulations, you may be able to just incorporate this kind of information into your training to let people know that these are some vectors that attackers might use. I would say know your environment's risk and plan accordingly. Every organization is different. Some folks are really locked down. Some folks have a, freer kind of environment where folks can bring in their own technology and they can use it. There are some organizations where employees can easily do personal stuff or even play games during the day, depending on what's going on. There's no right or wrong here. It's all about what's right for your organization. But the important thing is to know what your risks are and just plan accordingly with your monitoring. You got to train users on how to recognize red flags. For example, urgent requests for sensitive information like passwords, knowing that like your IT department is never going to ask for a password, for example. Um, these red flags, the good news is they apply universally. And not only are you protecting your organization by training users on them, but you are also protecting your employees themselves, right? I think everybody knows somebody who has been socially engineered, or more commonly known, scammed, in their personal lives, and the results can just be heartbreaking. So teaching people to recognize the red flags of social engineering will also benefit them even in their personal lives, which is great. And finally, like, make sure that users know how to report social engineering. Users are a really great source of identifying incidents. Frequently, they are the first path to recognizing an incident. And so make sure that users know, maybe the path is they call the help desk, and then the help desk contacts the security folks. And the security folks, if there is a pattern, they know that there may be an incident going on. Whatever that path is, just make sure that everybody knows it. Make sure you have an incident response plan in place for that. Finally, for everybody, I would say, in general, just stop when anything looks or feels different from the usual process. I mentioned that deceptive hardware. If you're going through an untrusted Wi-Fi access point and you see a warning, like a certificate warning, when you go to visit Google or your bank or Facebook, whatever, stop, because it may be that someone's trying to jump in the middle of your transaction. Also know that attackers exploit fear and urgency. They will tell you you have to do something now. They will threaten consequences if you don't do what they want. For example, the Social Security Administration is looking for you, and if you don't reply to this, you're going to go to jail or get your house repossessed. If you are unsure, because one issue that I take with many companies now, for example, Amazon, is that they will send, for example, text messages with a link in there and say there is something urgent that needs your attention. Click on this link to address it. The link that Amazon sends out goes to a.co, which is their owned domain. But man, that looks suspicious. And in my opinion, it's kind of training users to respond to phishing emails inadvertently. So knowing that we live in that world and that there is legitimate communication that's going to come through text or email or other channels, um, I would advise users, if they want to know if it's legit, go to that organization or that person using your own channels and check with them. If someone asks you to do something and it's kind of a unusual, suspicious request, call them back using the phone number that's in your company directory and ask them if they requested that. If your bank tells you you got to do something and it's urgent, go to the bank using your address, your bookmark, log in, and then check and see if there's a notification there. I think that's probably the best thing that people can do if they are unsure if something is spam or legit. So, yep, it's a hard problem to solve. I think that knowledge is power, and training users on what to do is extremely helpful. So just a little 15-minute overview of some things that we have seen at Sadara that are outside of the inbox, and some things to be aware of. So I'm happy to answer questions from anybody, or honor any discussion that anybody wants to have about things. And I really appreciate your folks' time. So does anybody have anything they want to ask? Any conversations, stories? Love stories. Stories are a very powerful way of helping to educate people and learn more, for sure.
Yeah, I could say personally, I've definitely gotten a lot of spam type texts in my,
Yeah,
and you're like, is that something you're supposed to go to? Everybody, I think one of the most common ones is the postal. We're
yeah,
unable to deliver this package to you. Like
yeah.
that one that's almost a weekly kind of thing for me.
They are, and yeah, we have absolutely had we have worked with organizations at Sadara where the attackers were going after employees' personal phones with SMS texts, 100%. So even if your employees have personal phone numbers, it is an attack vector. And like I said, because you don't have visibility or control over your employees' phones, sometimes the only way to address this stuff is really by educating employees and making sure that they know how to report things if they suspect that it's a target on your organization.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there anything that can be done like in that type of an attack? What would you do?
Yeah. It's yeah, like I said, it's just it is education. It's making sure that users know if they, and then make sure that they know that they can report stuff that they think is related to the organization, even if it isn't, directly on their work computer. Knowing that attackers may go after people personally is a little bit scary, but the security team can only respond to it if they know about it, right? So just having those like paths in place, knowing that like users have the help desk number, that they can call the help desk is going to respond, and that the help desk knows who to contact if they start to see a pattern of something that might indicate like a coordinated security incident.
Definitely makes sense. I think a
Yep.
lot of time people are almost they don't say anything because they don't want to upset the apple cart or cause problems. But I think you agree. It's probably the most important thing that can be done is just telling somebody.
Yeah, I think also, yeah, making sure that people know, that's a good point. Making sure people know that even if they click on the link, even if they provide information, obviously it's embarrassing when that happens, but it can happen to anybody. And because attackers exploit so much emotion, so much fear and urgency, a lot of times people will not recognize that something is a social engineering attack until after it's already taken place. They recognize it immediately, and it has happened where people have tried to cover it up or they don't report it. So I guess like, yeah, as part of social engineering awareness and training, just make sure that people know that even, if they've replied to something, they provided information, it's important to be upfront, forthcoming about it.
For
All
sure.
right. I do see a couple of questions here we have. Have you seen search engines being poisoned with false contact info for companies, and has it been effective? Yes, I saw that last week personally. Um, I was searching for something last week for like Apple subscription information. The first two results on Google that were sponsored results were phishing pages for Apple subscriptions. I would guess that that has been effective, given that that is a practice that I've seen continuing to be used. Absolutely. And if it is possible to use some kind of ad blockers or something like that, that may be effective. That may be really the only technological um, measure that you could take to prevent that. Otherwise, like I said, just education. Someone said, I received an email claiming that I've won a large sum of money and urging me to contact them as soon as possible. Very, very common. Very common. Lots of different motivators and techniques that people use for enticing people into replying. Someone said another type of social engineering attack on people, Facebook marketplace scams are on the rise, with attackers promising to send the item when a customer sends a small portion of the asking price. That's true. If you have an interest in this stuff, there are a lot of resources out there that explain the specific kind of scams. Some of them are really elaborate and interesting. Frankly, I love reading about scams. I don't like the fact that they take place, but some of them are really clever. Do you consider training users to look at the URL the QR code is pointing to when they scan the code with their smartphone? I think that is a good practice. Often, I think that uh, looking at a domain, if you know what to look for, can be a really good hint that that something is a phish or social engineering attack. I think a lot of people don't quite understand, you IT folks understand like the idea of a subdomain and a domain and a top level domain, that it would be, something like uh, account.apple.com belongs to Apple and it's the account. But someone who's trying to scam you might do something like account.apple.xyzabc.com. And in reality, xyzabc.com is the suspicious part because it's not owned by Apple. So I think it is worthwhile maybe to incorporate into your training, having users recognize which domains might be legit and which ones aren't. Sometimes it is hard to tell because people will do typo squatting. They'll make it look similar. But I think it is, just at least personally speaking, the domain is one of the red flags that I often see when people are trying to social engineer, for sure. So I think it's worth putting some time into. All right. Have you seen AI play a role in any attacks? Yeah. Yes. So I think that AI is often used right now, like in reality, I think it's often used to generate the wording for emails because historically people have looked at grammar errors and spelling errors to tell if something is a fish. If you use AI, the wording can be pretty realistic. Also, there's like some cultural differences sometimes. You have somebody across the world trying to scam you, and you're like, if they say kindly, you're like, okay, that's probably not an American. And so they'll use AI to generate plausible emails. That's the way I most commonly see it used, or using it to like clone websites to look similar. I think that, as I said, I think that voice and video AI is not quite at the level where it is commonly accessible to be used in live conversations. Um, I would expect that to change within a year or so. I fully think in a year that may be a more plausible way of attacking. And there may be sophisticated attackers who are using AI on live calls and video calls right now, if it's worth it for the right target. All right, does anybody have any other questions? And I am, if you have questions afterward, if you message Sidara, it will get to me. I'm always happy to talk to people. All right. I don't see anything else. All right, cool. Well, I really appreciate you guys had great questions. And like I said, I appreciate you folks logging in on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning into afternoon to hear some chat about social engineering. Stay safe out there, guys.
I have a few more things.
Oh, you do?
Just to
Okay.
note, yeah, we've got this webinar series is going to continue through the month of October. We are doing one of these sessions every Friday, same time, 11:30 to noon, about 20 minutes worth of content and time for question and answers. The next topic we have for next week are common ways hackers break in, vulnerabilities you need to fix. So our one of our red team leaders, Nick, is going to be presenting for that one. Following that, we've got creative approaches to keeping cybersecurity awareness engaging, and then Ask Me Anything with our panel of CISOs. So we hope you can make it to the rest of these, and we hope that you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for your time, Courtney. We appreciate it.
Thanks, folks. Have a good one.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.